So today is going to be take your fam to work day. It's quieter out here. This is my office, the desert. You could go for a little ride, find a nice little spot, tell you a story about some crime. All right, see you in a minute. This is where I start my day. Check this out. Couldn't ask for a more beautiful office space. Just couldn't. Well, what do? Well, I look for rocks. Agates to be more specific. Some jasper, quartz crystals, all of the above. Anything I could sell as a piece, as a jewelry piece, or as something somebody else can make jewelry out of. That's what I sell. I usually sell the most specimens or jewelry pieces, but sometimes people want to make their own, and so I'll sell them like that too. That's what I wrote up. Pretty fucking awesome. Okay, let's get started. Hi YouTube fam, thank you for joining me today for Bring Your Fam to Work Day. My name is Gina Marie Bova. This is where I come to discuss solved and unsolved true crime cases, true crime facts and stats, and missing person cases that I don't feel have gotten enough attention from mainstream media. If you are interested in everything true crime, then you have come to the right place. I do hope that you'll choose to subscribe to this channel, and if you click that little bell, YouTube will notify you whenever I upload new content. So first, let me say welcome to my office. I work here in the desert, as you can see behind me. The reason I am doing this, the camera may not be as steady because I'm holding on to it, but the sound has got to be a lot better than listen to the chickens and the cats and the dogs and the donkey and everything in the background. So let's give this one a try, shall we? Also, a quick warning before we get started. The videos on my channel are intended for mature audiences only. They are not for children or for those with weak stomachs. My language is not censored, and I don't sugarcoat anything. I give gruesome details and show photos at my discretion. These stories are hard to hear, and I know, because they're every bit as hard to tell. Do not think that I'm not going to tell it just because it's gruesome. Some of these stories even bring me to tears, but the reason I tell them is because evil does not go away just because we bury our heads in the sand. From 1994 to 1996 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a series of murders had police scratching their heads. They thought there might be a serial killer in their midst, but they did not have the physical evidence to prove it. As the bodies started adding up, detectives still had no leads. Since they were at a standstill, they set up a 16-man special task force of detectives and officers whose only focus was figuring out who was hunting, killing, and dumping these women. And unfortunately, the lack of evidence and scientific know-how at the time, it was the 90s after all, made it impossible for them to solve these crimes. Some answers would not be had for over 25 years, but before I get into that, let me tell you the little bit that I know about each of the victims that some of the detectives believe are linked to one killer. The first body that was discovered in the string of murders was that of Lisa Irene Ottberg. Lisa was 24 years old from Grand Rapids. She died sometime around January 1st, 1994, but her body was not discovered until 2 months later. She was found on March 30th, 1994. Her body was found in Muskegon, Michigan. Cause of death was listed as murder, and manner of death was listed as strangulation. The second victim was Shelley Ray Christian, also known as Shelley Ray Kephart. She was a 29-year-old from Minnesota. Her body was found by rabbit hunters on November 6, 1994, in a ditch near Wright Township. Unfortunately, her body wasn't identified until January of this year, being 2022. Before that, she was only known as the name that the police gave her, which was Matilda. Her death certificate states that she died of homicidal means, though the specific manner of death is unknown. We'll get into her identification later. The next body that was found in Grand Rapids, Michigan belonged to 33-year-old Pamela Lynn Vero. She was killed on June 1st, 1995. Her body was found the following day in a riverbank in Walker, Michigan. The cause of death was determined to be murder, and the manner of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The victim was 37-year-old Gail Annette Cook. She was born in New Jersey and was living in Haslett, Michigan at the time of her death. She had been found strangled to death with a ligature and dumped in a wooded area near Leonard Street in Grand Rapids Township. The body of 25-year-old Dawn Marie Shaver was found in a creek beneath railroad tracks in Grand Rapids. It was November 17, 1996. She had been strangled and beaten to death. She had blunt force injuries to the head, chest, and abdomen. The medical examiner believed that Michelle Ann Becker died on or around April 27th. Her skeletal remains were not found until August the 9th that same year, making it summertime. The heat speeds up decomposition, and the fact that all that was left was her skeleton made it impossible to collect any DNA that may have been left behind by the killer. Sherry Jeannie Stewart Brown, 32. All that's known is that she's lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's unknown how, when, where, why she was murdered. Although it is believed that she died sometime around August 9th, 1996 in Walker, Michigan. She was found nude and dumped after her death. Her death certificate wasn't even signed for 3.5 years later, till 3.5 years after she was found. Somebody dropped the ball on this one. And I don't know if it was the same medical examiner that signed it that was on duty when she was found. I'm not sure. Nothing's really written about it. All I found was that it took them 3.5 years to write the following on her certificate. Quote, found body based on autopsy, based on thorough investigation of circumstances, cause of death cannot be determined. Well, I could tell you this. She didn't dump herself out there nude, okay? So obviously cause of death would be murder. Manner of death may not be known because she was apparently a skeleton when they found her, but that's not even for sure because nothing is written on the death certificate and there are no reports going along with it. And like I said, it took them 3.5 years to even sign the death certificate, which is some bullshit. Apparently some of these victims just didn't seem to be on the top of their list of things to work on at the time. A lot of these victims, yes, he preyed on people with drug addictions or that were sex workers because he felt like they were easy targets. And all the reports that I see from newspapers and such about the victims always say sex worker or a drug addict, and I don't like that. If she was a secretary, would they write that? I doubt it. If she was, worked at Burger King, they wouldn't even put that. But it sells more papers if you say things like sex worker and drug addict, and I don't feel like their labels or the way they lived their lives at the time that they died is relevant. The fact is they were human beings and they were being murdered at an alarming rate. And they were so hell-bent on finding out who it was that it took them 3.5 years just to sign a death certificate. So that shows you what kind of urgency they and what priority this case took. It pisses me off. But let's move on to the next one. On October 3rd, 1996, a delivery driver came upon a woman's body that was rolled up in a blanket. She had only been killed a few hours before her body had been discovered. Unfortunately, investigators could not identify her, so she was listed in the reports as that of a Jane Doe. The death certificate also stated, no name, no known occupation, no known age. Murder was the cause of death. She had been hogtied, beaten, strangled, and stabbed, wrapped in a blanket and dumped. She would not have been identified for many years to come. The perpetrator left DNA on her and in her, and since she was found so quickly, that DNA was also collected by investigators, and it would lead not only to her identification, but one day also to charges being filed, and we will be talking about that later as well. Dawn Charlene Phillips, 26, died on or about January 19th, 1996. Her body was found in Plainfield Township 10 months later. Her death certificate said her cause of death was murder with an unspecified manner. Anya Marie Campos was killed around September 4th, 1996. Her body was found on September 21st, 1996, off Butterworth by the gypsum mine. Her skeletal remains were found by a jogger, but it's not known where or how she died. Cheryl Lynn Mason was killed sometime around August 6, 1996. Her body was found in Grand Rapids, but not until October 13th, 1996, just over 2 months after she was dumped. Her death certificate states simply that she died of homicidal means. Unfortunately, her remains were too degraded to be able to know exactly when she died or how she was killed. Grand Rapids resident Victoria Moore is thought to have died around August 1st, 1996. Her body was not found until October 27th, 1996. Once again, I could find very little information about her, but her death certificate stated that she was killed by an unknown assailant by unknown means. The death certificate of Stephanie Renee Judson lists her as a Jane Doe, birthday unknown, parents unknown, hometown unknown. She was killed sometime before July 31st, 97, when her body was found at a roadside park in Ada Township by a maintenance worker. She died of homicidal means. Judson was a mother of 2 in her late 20s and was originally from Benton Harbor. Genealogy testing finally puts a name to Ada Bones. They called her Ada. When her body was identified in January of this year through genetic testing, her family told the news stations that she had a heart of gold. She was the final victim in the series of killings. August of this year, 2022, a 64-year-old Garry Dean Artman of Florida was arrested in Mississippi after being pulled over for a traffic stop. Yes, he currently lives in Florida, but he has lived all over, and he's a long-haul truck driver. It has been over 25 years that he has been a long-haul truck driver, ever since he was released from prison last time, after doing 11 years for criminal sexual conduct or rape. It seems this time he was leaving no witnesses. He did not know of the new crime-fighting techniques of using DNA. This was the 90's after all. He left his DNA on and in Sharon Hammock, vaginally, rectally, and on items that she was discarded with, like the rope that was hog-tying her. Jane Doe and Matilda victims were identified as Shelley Ray Christian and Sharon Hammock. But when DNA was put into the system looking for familial matches, the DNA led investigators to Sharon's killer and surprisingly linked him to another murder, the cold case of Dusty Shucks, who was killed by stabbing and blunt force trauma in 2006 in Minnesota. Fortunately, DNA led them to 2 victims that were found before the evidence was degraded. It was only 2 out of the 13. But 2 is better than none. Sorry, these flies are driving me crazy. As I said earlier, he was pulled over for a traffic stop, and when the Mississippi State Trooper ran his name, he was arrested without incident because of the warrant. He was extradited back to Michigan to stand charges for murder, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. And since being there, Minnesota has also filed charges for murder and kidnapping, rape. And I will update you as this trial proceeds. Like I said, he was only arrested in August and we just now started September, so it's going to be a little while, but at least he's locked up. Nobody else is getting killed by him at the moment, and hopefully he will never see the light of day again. I will update you when this case concludes, and until then, well, until my next episode, y'all stay safe out there. I'll see you soon.